So, look, I am still a believer that the 4-year cycle exists. I know there are some now saying that, because of Trump and because of the Bitcoin strategic reserve and, there's going to be this massive movement toward accumulating Bitcoin and the 4-year cycle is going to go out the window. I'm going to bet that humans are going to human.
마크 유스코는 미국의 유명한 투자 전문가이자 오랜 시간 동안 전통 금융과 암호화폐 투자에 대한 깊은 통찰력을 바탕으로 비트코인의 장기적인 성장 가능성을 강력하게 지지하고 있는 인물 중 하나인데요. 오래전부터 코인에 대한 그의 예측은 높은 적중률을 보이고 있고, 이런 그가 2025년 비트코인 전망과 알트코인에 대해 얘기했습니다.
So many people had their expectations built up positively for the halving, that we would have this parabolic move right after the halving. And that clearly didn't happen. You saw a pretty meaningful sell down from 74,000 all the way down to 53,000. I think that caught a lot of people off guard. On the same day as the approval of the Bitcoin ETFs, the CME released a whole bunch of additional futures products that essentially increased the liquidity pool for people to take the opposite side, right? You can go short futures, you go long the ETF, have a market neutral trade, but that constant selling in the futures market puts a cap on upward trajectory of prices and even could put downward pressure if somebody else piles on and goes naked short. So this downward relentless pressure finally dissipated in September, and we made this really rocket ship move all the way back to new all-time highs. And the nice thing is we've seen this accumulation pattern again, higher highs and higher lows.
So according to your view, Trump's election served as the main catalyst that inverted this trend?
Well, no, it was an accelerator. I think it was more the tail as opposed to the dog. I think the dog is the fact that there's new money coming into this market. The big buyers, right? Some of the other, global large owners continued to buy, and the ETFs just relentless buying. And I think that's what we're seeing now.
There was another thing that probably surprised you, because I remember that back in January, you were saying that you were not really expecting an Ethereum ETF in the US to be approved anytime soon. Eventually, we saw that happening in the summer, but it didn't seem to have such a big effect, a big success as the Bitcoin ETF.
Yeah, no, I was a little surprised. I thought Gensler had been very clear that he wasn't going to allow that to happen. But just like with the Bitcoin ETF, he didn't want that either. But eventually he had to relent. And I give the ETH people a lot of credit for getting that through. But to your point, a surprise was that there wasn't the same follow through in price. There was some demand for the ETF. And I think the reason for that is Bitcoin digital gold store of value, that mantra, I think is acceptable to big institutional investors, sovereign wealth, etc. The ETH use case, smart contracts, platform, toolkit, it's like, well, maybe, but what about this Solana thing? And what about this Avalanche thing? And what about these other things that I hear about that are better and faster and cheaper? And so I just don't think there was as much universal acceptance of the use case and the investment thesis as there was for Bitcoin.
Yeah, that sounds like the reason. By the way, now I would like to talk about your outlook for 2025. So what are the milestones that you are looking forward to in 2025? I'm pretty sure we're going to talk about the Bitcoin strategic reserve, but maybe you have other.
So, look, I am still a believer that the 4-year cycle exists. I know there are some now saying that, because of Trump and because of the Bitcoin strategic reserve and, there's going to be this massive movement toward accumulating Bitcoin and the 4-year cycle is going to go out the window. I'm going to bet that humans are going to human. So My expectation for this year was that fair value, which post-halving was going to be in the, 80,000-ish range, somewhere like that, would continue to accrete all the way to somewhere around 100K by where we are today. So to me, fair value is right around that 6-digit level. I figured we would blow through that 6-digit number, and then humans would human. The humans would come in and they'd start to lever up, and we'd see a parabolic move probably to 120, maybe even 150. This time in 25, it'll be April-ish, and that would kind of make sense, a year after the halving. So at that point, we'd hit that ebullient level. Then the question is, do we get the passage of the strategic Bitcoin reserve? The exchanges don't have enough Bitcoin on their platforms, and people are going to be scrambling for it. Certainly possible. Could that push us well past that 150K range? It's certainly possible. If you think about a bell curve distribution, to me, the most likely is we get to fair value, we go to, call it 50% premium above fair value, so that's in that 150 range.
So your outlook seemed to me quite realistic if compared to the one we heard from Samson Mao, who came on our show lately. He was saying that he expects Bitcoin to reach $1 million next year. What can you say about that prediction?
I think Samson's a great thinker on this. But let's just do some math, right? Now, the challenge I have with that is a $20 trillion market cap. So we just hit 2 trillion, or we're just under 2 trillion. A 10x from here means $20 trillion. Well, $20 trillion, what has to happen for this asset to be worth 20 trillion? So people have said it's digital gold, right? Well, all of the gold in the world above ground is like $12 trillion. Well, only half of that counts, because half of it is jewelry and chalices and gold leaf and gold bars. That really doesn't count. Well, the gold bars do, because they're part of the monetary base. The monetary value of gold is about 6 trillion. So we're a third of the way there already. So the idea that the monetary base, if Bitcoin is digital gold and it needs to replace the base layer of gold in central banks around the world, 6-ish trillion is plenty. Now, you say, but that's not all going to be owned by central banks because there's individual holders. Those central banks have got to buy it from somebody. And those, sellers, people say, well, I'm never going to sell. Well, okay, but someone's got to sell for someone to buy. That's the way markets work. They can't make more out of thin air like fiat currency. So in that environment, Samson's point is interesting, because if I'm a central bank and I say I have to buy 200,000 coins, and Tom Lee says there's no one to sell it to me, well, then I got to keep bidding the price up. So could you see a parabolic move? Sure, but the problem I see with that is if the monetary aggregate base has to increase so much in order to displace gold, what does that do to overall prices of everything? Probably not a very good thing. And what does that do for overall economic activity? Probably not a very good thing. And then what does that do for future demand? So it's all interconnected.
마크 유스코는 비트코인이 15만 달러를 넘어설 가능성은 있지만 현실적인 시나리오로는 적정 가치인 10만 달러에 도달한 후 약 50%의 프리미엄이 더해져 최종적으로 15만 달러 수준에 머무를 것으로 전망합니다. 반면 비트코인이 100만 달러에 도달할 것이라는 예측에 대해서는 회의적인 입장을 보이며 이를 실현하려면 시가총액이 현재 약 2조 달러에서 20조 달러까지 증가해야 하지만 현실적으로 가능성이 낮다고 지적합니다. 또한 비트코인이 디지털 골드로서 금을 대체할 이해하려면 중앙은행과 개인 투자자의 적극적인 매수가 필수적이지만 현재 금의 화폐적 가치인 약 6조 달러를 완전히 대체하는 것은 어렵다고 분석합니다. 그는 이 과정이 경제 전반에 부정적인 영향을 미칠 수도 있다는 점에서 신중한 접근이 필요하다고 강조합니다.
So as a final question, I wanted to get your outlook on altcoins for 2025. Are there any specific altcoins out there? Who are you excited about?
You know, we don't trade them. In fact, I was talking on a show last week about this, that we historically don't play in that area. And the reason is our funds, 70% of the money goes into equity of businesses that support the digital asset ecosystem. 30% goes into the liquid protocols themselves. But we tend to stay in the Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, Uniswap, things that we think have a long-term future, kind of the picks and shovels of the digital age. So I have historically been, pretty open-minded, but pretty anti things like XRP and Cardano and Hedera because I couldn't see anyone building on them. I've been doing venture capital in the space for almost 7 years. I've never met a Cardano developer, not one. Now, I'm sure, and then somebody put out on the page, so, all you developers, call Mark. I still haven't gotten a call. So if you're out there, call me. I struggle with Ethereum a little bit because someone asked me the question. I thought it was a good question. He said, if Ethereum didn't exist and was invented today, would anybody use it? It's a very interesting question, right? It's more expensive and slower than the competitors. So if it didn't have this giant installed base because it was first, would people use it? I think the answer is no. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to bail on Ethereum. That's not my point. But it was an interesting perspective. So that explains why Solana and Avalanche and other things have done well.
일단 비트코인은 지금 마크 유스코가 예측한 대로 10만 달러 선을 돌파했었고 비축 자산 채택 상황을 보면 15만 달러까지는 무난하게 갈 수 있을 거라고 생각하는데요. 여러분들은 어떻게 생각하시나요? 우리는 객관적인 시각으로 투자를 해야 하고 지금 당장만 보고 투자할 게 아니라 미래를 보고 투자를 해야겠죠. 010-2472-0429 전화번호로 탈개미 적어서 문자 보내주시면 2025년 비트코인과 코인 시장에 대한 분석, 정보들 공유해드리겠습니다. 현재 우리에게 중요한 것은 이러한 정보를 어떻게 활용할 것인가입니다. 지금까지 영상 시청해주셔서 감사하고요. 다음에 더 좋은 영상으로 찾아뵙겠습니다. 감사합니다.